I just watched a Sagittarius completely fall apart trying to choose between someone they loved and their own freedom. And the most painful part wasn't the choice itself. It was that they knew, deep down, that no relationship would ever give them what they actually needed. Because what they needed was impossible. They needed someone who could love them while also letting them disappear. They needed intimacy without restriction. They needed commitment without feeling trapped. And that person doesn't exist. That's the real struggle of Sagittarius in love. Not that they're afraid of commitment or too independent or scared of being vulnerable, but that they're fundamentally torn between two things that feel mutually exclusive: the need for deep connection and the need for infinite freedom. And every relationship becomes a battle between these two forces inside them, a battle they don't even know how to explain to the people who love them. So let me tell you what actually happens when a Sagittarius tries to be in love. Not the simplified version everyone talks about, not the, oh, Sagittarius just wants to be free and travel the world stereotype. The real version. The one where they're desperately trying to reconcile two parts of themselves that seem fundamentally at war. The version where loving someone feels like slowly suffocating. The version where leaving someone you love feels like dying a little bit inside. Because here's what nobody talks about. Sagittarius isn't afraid of love. They're afraid of the cost of love. And the cost, for them, feels impossibly high. First, let's talk about what happens when a Sagittarius falls in love. Because the initial experience is absolutely incredible, explosive actually. When a Sagittarius falls in love, it's not subtle, it's not gradual, it's sudden and all-consuming, and they feel like they've discovered the meaning of life. They're completely present, they're engaged, they're planning futures and making promises, and genuinely believing that this time, this connection will be different. This time they'll stay, this time they won't need to run. And it's beautiful because they mean it. In that moment, they absolutely mean every word. They're not lying or performing. They genuinely believe that being with this person is enough, that their need for freedom will be satisfied by having someone to share the journey with. And for a little while, it actually works. The relationship feels like freedom. Exploration becomes shared exploration. Adventure becomes a couple's activity. And the Sagittarius thinks, oh, this is what I've been missing. This is how I reconcile both sides of myself. I get my freedom and I get deep connection. But then something shifts. And it's not a dramatic shift, it's slow. And the Sagittarius doesn't even realize it's happening until they wake up one day and feel trapped. The togetherness that felt liberating starts to feel limiting. The shared adventure starts to feel like an obligation. The person they love so desperately now feels like an anchor. And the freedom they thought they could experience with this person starts to feel impossible, because freedom, for Sagittarius, isn't really about activities or travel or doing things. It's about autonomy. It's about the right to make choices without considering someone else. It's about the ability to follow impulses without having to explain or justify or compromise. And sharing a life with someone means you can't do that. You have to consider them. You have to check in. You have to compromise. You have to explain yourself. And to a Sagittarius, that feels like prison bars being built around them slowly, without them even noticing when they went up. Here's something specific that happens with Sagittarius in relationships that's particularly painful. They start to resent their partner for the very things they loved about them at the beginning. The person they loved becomes the thing keeping them in place. The relationship they were excited about becomes the thing preventing them from being who they want to be. The commitment they made becomes a debt they're trying to pay off. And they start to pull away. Not dramatically, not intentionally, but consciously and subtly. They start to create distance. They pick fights about nothing so they have an excuse to be alone. They make plans without their partner more often. They flirt with other people to feel that spark of possibility again. They talk about dreams that don't include their partner. They start planning trips solo. They spend more time with friends. They disappear emotionally, even if they're physically there. And the partner watches all of this happening, and it breaks their heart because they don't understand what changed. They don't see that what changed isn't the Sagittarius's feelings about them. What changed is the Sagittarius's relationship with freedom. What changed is that the Sagittarius realized they made a mistake. They realized they tried to be someone they're not. And now they're suffocating. But they don't know how to say that without destroying the person they love. So they just create distance. They hope the other person will get tired and leave. They hope the relationship will naturally end, so they don't have to be the one to make the cruel choice. Let's talk about what freedom actually means to Sagittarius, because it's not what most people think. People assume Sagittarius wants to travel and have adventures and live a wild lifestyle. And sure, some of them do. But that's not what freedom really means to them. That's just how some of them express it. Real freedom, for Sagittarius, is the right to change their mind. It's the right to wake up tomorrow as a completely different person with completely different priorities and not have to explain it to anyone. It's the right to be inconsistent. It's the right to want something desperately and then realize they don't want it anymore and move on without guilt. Freedom is knowing they can leave whenever they need to. Not that they will, but that they could. The possibility alone keeps them breathing. That's why committed relationships are so terrifying for them, because committed relationships eliminate that possibility. They require them to stay. They require explanation and justification if they want to leave. They require them to work through problems instead of just starting over somewhere new. And for a Sagittarius, having to stay feels worse than almost anything. Even if they love the person, even if the relationship is good, the fact that they're choosing to stay, that they're bound by promise and commitment and other people's feelings, that's unbearable. They need to know they could leave at any moment. That gives them the freedom to stay. Here's something about Sagittarius that explains a lot. They're terrified of becoming trapped in a life that isn't theirs. They've seen people settle. They've seen people choose security over authenticity. They've seen people stay in relationships and jobs and towns because they made a commitment and they honor it, even though it's killing them. And Sagittarius looked at those people and decided that would never be them. They decided they would always choose freedom. They decided they would never let fear or obligation trap them in a half-life. But then they fall in love. And suddenly they understand why people do it. Suddenly they understand the appeal of staying. Suddenly they understand why someone would compromise their freedom for another person. And that understanding terrifies them, because it means they could become trapped. It means they could choose love and wake up 10 years later hating their life because they gave up too much freedom. So they fight against it. They fight against the urge to fully commit. They fight against the domesticity. They fight against the routine. They fight against becoming one of those people who settled. And it comes across as them not being able to commit, as them being selfish, as them not loving their partner enough. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is they're fighting for their life. They're trying not to disappear into someone else's version of a relationship. Let's talk about the specific ways this plays out in relationships. Sagittarius will be completely all in one moment and then suddenly pull back and need space. A lot of space. The kind of space that feels like abandonment to their partner. They'll want to talk about moving to another country next month, or quitting their job, or completely changing their life. And their partner will think they're joking, or they'll think this is planning that they can participate in. But really, the Sagittarius is fantasizing about escape. They're imagining versions of their life where they don't have this responsibility. Or they'll get excited about friendships with other people and spend all their energy on those connections, temporarily forgetting their partner exists. Or they'll want spontaneous adventures their partner can't or won't join. And when their partner can't go, instead of going alone like they could, they get resentful. Not consciously resentful, but they start to blame their partner for keeping them from living their life. They'll make plans, then cancel them because they got bored or something more interesting came up. They won't check in or communicate because they hate feeling controlled by needing to update someone else.
They'll expect their partner to be completely flexible and understanding and secure enough to not need constant attention. But humans aren't meant to be that independent in a relationship. We're meant to matter to each other. We're meant to be important enough to check in on. And the more their partner tries to not need them, the lonelier it gets. Now let's talk about what happens when a Sagittarius is with someone who actually gives them freedom. Someone who doesn't try to control them or chain them down. Someone who celebrates their independence and encourages their growth and doesn't panic when they need space. You'd think this would be perfect. You'd think this would solve everything. And it does, for a little while. But then something strange happens. The Sagittarius realizes that the freedom they have isn't about their partner anymore. It's about them. They're free to leave anytime they want. There's nothing holding them. No guilt, no drama, no obligation. Just pure freedom. And sometimes that freedom becomes more attractive than the relationship because they've gotten what they came for. They've gotten their freedom back. And now staying doesn't feel like freedom anymore. Now staying feels like choosing. And choosing means they could be making a mistake. Choosing means commitment. Choosing means they could become trapped. So they sabotage it. They create drama where there was none. They find problems with their partner they didn't see before. They start to believe this isn't actually what they want. They start pulling away. And their partner, confused, gives them even more freedom. What do you need from me? And the Sagittarius realizes what they actually needed was the possibility of escape, not the actual escape, just knowing they could. Without that possibility, without that tension, the relationship loses its charge. It becomes comfortable. And comfortable feels like stagnation to a Sagittarius. Comfortable feels like slow death. This is the real tragedy of Sagittarius in love. They need the tension between freedom and commitment to stay interested. They need to feel like they're choosing their partner every day, not that they're stuck with them. They need to believe they could leave, but they're choosing to stay. But that's not how love usually works. Usually, love progresses towards more security, more certainty, more commitment. Usually, people want to reduce the tension and increase the stability. But Sagittarius moves in the opposite direction. The more stable things become, the more they need to destabilize them. The more committed things become, the more they need to threaten that commitment just to feel alive in the relationship. Let's talk about what Sagittarius is actually struggling with, because it's not simple wanderlust or fear of commitment or selfishness. It's something more complex and more painful. Sagittarius is struggling with the paradox of human connection. We need other people to feel fully alive, but other people's needs and expectations and presence can feel suffocating. We need to be known to feel truly loved, but being known means losing some of our mystery and autonomy. We need to give our heart to someone, but giving our heart means being vulnerable to being hurt. And Sagittarius feels this paradox more acutely than most signs, because for them, freedom and autonomy are core to their identity. They build their sense of self on their ability to choose. So giving part of that choice to someone else feels like losing themselves. Every compromise, every time they have to consider someone else's feelings, every time they stay when they want to run, it feels like a tiny death. It feels like another piece of them being surrendered. And they can do it. They can make those sacrifices, but only for so long, because eventually the weight of all those sacrifices becomes unbearable. Eventually they get tired of dying little bits. Eventually they need to run just to feel like they're alive again. Here's what happens when a Sagittarius leaves, and I mean really leaves. Not a breakup that comes after a long deterioration, but an actual leaving. When they've reached their breaking point,
They can feel like ghosts about it. One day they're there, the next day they're gone. Emotionally gone, even if it takes them a while to physically leave. They can switch off the feelings almost overnight. Not because they didn't love you, but because they have to. Because if they let themselves feel the weight of what they're doing, they'll never go. And they have to go. They're suffocating. And they can seem cold about it. Not because they're cruel, but because they need to disconnect from the emotional reality of what they're doing in order to survive it.
If they let themselves feel the pain they're causing, it would paralyze them. So they compartmentalize. They focus on the freedom. They focus on the escape. They focus on the new person or the new place or the new version of themselves they get to become. And to the person they're leaving, it's devastating because it seems like suddenly all the love is gone. Suddenly they don't matter. Suddenly it's easy to leave. But what actually happened is the Sagittarius reached a breaking point. They reached a point where staying felt like dying. And they chose life. They chose freedom. And they had to kill part of themselves to do it. Now let's talk about what Sagittarius actually needs in a relationship to make it work. Because it's possible. It's not common, but it's possible. They need someone who understands that their need for freedom isn't about running from the relationship. It's about having space to breathe within the relationship. It's about not losing themselves to the partnership. They need someone who can give them real autonomy, not performative independence where they're supposed to pretend they don't need anything, but actual freedom to maintain their own interests and friendships and dreams, freedom to change their mind about things, freedom to fail or succeed on their own terms. They need someone who can handle the intensity swings, the times when they're completely present and the times when they need to disappear, who can be secure enough to not take it personally, who can understand that their distance isn't about not loving them. They need someone who shares their sense of adventure and philosophy, not necessarily their lifestyle, but their mindset. Someone who gets that life is for exploring and growing and changing. Someone who sees commitment not as putting your life on pause, but as a partnership that amplifies your ability to live. They need someone who doesn't need them to be stable and predictable. Someone who can embrace their contradictions. Someone who can love them even when they're inconsistent. And they need someone who's secure enough to say, "I need you," without it becoming a chain. Someone who can communicate, "This matters to me," without the Sagittarius feeling attacked or controlled or guilty. Most importantly, they need someone who understands that loving a Sagittarius means accepting they might leave. Not that they will, but that they might. And that acceptance, paradoxically, is what makes them feel free enough to actually stay. Here's what happens when a Sagittarius does this work, when they actually integrate their need for freedom with their capacity for love, when they figure out how to commit without suffocating. They become extraordinary partners. Because they bring that adventurous spirit into the relationship. They keep things fresh and interesting. They encourage growth and exploration. They push their partner to be more than they thought they could be. They refuse to let the relationship become stagnant or comfortable in a stagnant way. They're generous and enthusiastic and optimistic. They make their partner feel like the best version of themselves. They see possibility where others see limitation. They inspire people to dream bigger. They're loyal in a way that's different from other signs, not in a dutiful way, but because they chose to be there. Every day, they choose it. They chose you over freedom. That's a profound commitment. And they can be vulnerable. They can admit that loving someone means a part of them is terrified, that committing means they have to surrender some of their autonomy, that they're struggling with this. And that vulnerability, that honesty about their internal conflict, that creates real intimacy. But getting there requires them to do something they resist. They have to stop seeing commitment as the opposite of freedom. They have to understand that real freedom isn't unlimited choices. It's being able to fully show up for the choices that matter most. They have to learn that losing part of yourself to someone isn't weakness.
It's actually the deepest form of strength, because it means you trust yourself enough to let someone in. You trust yourself enough to be vulnerable. You trust that even compromised, even vulnerable, you're still you. Most Sagittarius never get there. They keep running. They keep choosing freedom over love. They keep starting over with new people, thinking maybe with the next one they'll figure out how to stay. But the ones who do the work, who actually integrate these two sides of themselves, when they figure out how to commit without suffocating, they become the kind of partners that people remember, the kind of love that changes you, because they've learned to give their freedom to someone while also keeping their freedom. They've learned to commit while also keeping growing. They've learned to love while also staying alive.
Now let's talk about what Sagittarius needs from their partner. Because it's not all on them. The relationship needs two people who understand what's happening. The partner of a Sagittarius needs to understand that they're never going to be their entire world. Sagittarius has too many worlds, too many interests, too many dreams, and trying to be their whole world will exhaust you and push them away. They need to celebrate when their Sagittarius partner gets excited about something new, even if that something is a bit much, even if that something pulls attention away from the relationship temporarily. Because trying to contain that enthusiasm is like trying to contain a supernova. It's not going to work. It's only going to result in resentment. They need to be secure enough to not panic when their Sagittarius gets restless, when they start talking about wanting to leave or change or start over. Because Sagittarius talks like this all the time. Half the time they don't mean it literally. They mean it as exploration. They're dreaming out loud. And panicking or trying to shut it down is the fastest way to make them actually do it. They need to have their own life, their own interests, their own friends, their own dreams. Because if they're too dependent on the Sagittarius for their happiness, it will push the Sagittarius away. Sagittarius needs their partner to be their own person. They need to respect their partner. And it's hard to respect someone whose entire life revolves around you. They need to communicate clearly and directly, because Sagittarius will not read between the lines. They will not pick up on hints. They will not notice that they hurt you unless you tell them. And they need you to tell them directly, not in a way that makes them feel guilty, but in a way that says, "This is what I need." And they need to give their Sagittarius real space to miss them, not cold shoulder space, but actually separate space. Time apart, time doing things solo. Because Sagittarius needs to remember why they chose this person. They need to have experiences that remind them of what it feels like to be without this person. And sometimes that makes them appreciate it more. Sometimes that distance tightens the bond. But the thing the partner needs most is compassion for the internal struggle. Compassion for the fact that their Sagittarius is literally torn between two parts of themselves that feel irreconcilable. Compassion for how hard it is to choose commitment when every cell in your body wants to run. Because if the partner can understand that the Sagittarius's struggle isn't about them, that it's not that they don't love enough or aren't good enough, then maybe they can be patient. Maybe they can give them space to work it out. Maybe they can love them even when it's hard. Here's the truth that nobody wants to say about Sagittarius in love. Sometimes they leave even when you do everything right. Sometimes they choose freedom even when you gave them the choice to stay. Sometimes they run even when there's nothing to run from except their own fear. And it's not because you weren't enough. It's not because they didn't love you. It's because their need for freedom is sometimes stronger than their need for love. And they have to honor that need, or they'll spend the rest of their life resenting you for the life they didn't live. It's tragic. It's painful. But it's also honest. It's also real. And maybe the real love for a Sagittarius is being able to let them go. Being able to love them so much that you're willing to release them if staying is making them suffocate. Being willing to accept that maybe you could have been perfect for them, but they just needed freedom more than they needed perfect.
That's the untold struggle of Sagittarius hearts. Not that they can't love, but that they struggle to balance the two things that define them. They struggle to give themselves completely to someone without losing themselves. They struggle to stay when running is always an option. And if you love a Sagittarius, the best thing you can do is understand that struggle. Accept it. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to make them want to stay by being perfect or understanding or cool about everything. Sometimes they're going to leave no matter what. Sometimes freedom wins. And if you are a Sagittarius, maybe it's time to question whether freedom and love really have to be enemies. Maybe staying doesn't actually mean death. Maybe love doesn't have to cost you yourself. Maybe you can have both. But that's a choice only you can make. And Sagittarius is always about choosing, always about freedom, always about the possibility of something else. The real question is whether you're brave enough to stay.